In the spring of 1945, the skies above Japan were no longer a battlefield. They were a slaughterhouse. Once, in the early years of the Pacific War, Japan had ruled the air. The Mitsubishi A6M-0, fast and agile, was feared from Pearl Harbor to the Solomon Islands. Japanese pilots, trained to perfection, had earned a reputation for unmatched skill and daring. Their planes danced through the sky with deadly grace, light, maneuverable, and seemingly unstoppable. But as the war dragged on, that legend began to crumble. The Zero that once symbolized Japan's superiority had become a relic of a vanished age. The American war machine had evolved, faster, smarter, and more powerful. By 1945, the U.S. Army Air Forces dominated the Pacific skies with the P-51 Mustang, a fighter that could fly farther, higher, and faster than anything Japan could build. Day after day, formations of B-29 superfortresses roared above the islands, their bomb bays raining destruction upon Japan's cities. Tokyo, Osaka, Nagoya all burned beneath the waves of incendiary fire. And escorting those bombers were the Mustangs, sleek, silver phantoms that struck fear into every Japanese pilot who saw their glint in the sunlight. They seemed untouchable, moving with predatory precision, their engines singing with power Japan could not match. Then, one spring morning near the city of Chōfu, northwest of Tokyo, fate delivered Japan a rare opportunity. A P-51D Mustang, hit by ground fire during a bomber escort mission, spiraled down through the clouds. It didn't explode. Instead, it crash-landed in a field, its pilot killed or captured, its body largely intact. For Japan's military engineers, desperate for any insight into the enemy's superiority, this was an unexpected miracle. The order came swiftly from Imperial Army headquarters: recover the wreck immediately. Under armed guard, trucks and cranes arrived at the crash site. Soldiers worked cautiously, removing panels, wings, and sections of fuselage. What they could not repair, they preserved. Every bolt, every wire, every bullet hole was logged. The remains were transported under secrecy to the Army Aerotechnical Research Institute in Tachikawa, the heart of Japan's aviation science. When the Mustang's broken frame was finally brought into the hangar, the engineers gathered around it in silence. Men who had spent their careers designing fighters like the Ki-43 Hayabusa and Ki-84 Hayate stared at this foreign machine with a mix of awe and dread. To them, the Mustang was not simply an aircraft, it was a message from the future. The dismantling began at dawn. Teams worked in surgical precision, sketching every component, photographing every connection. The Packard-built Merlin engine, derived from Britain's Rolls-Royce design, drew immediate fascination. It was a 12-cylinder, liquid-cooled masterpiece capable of sustaining over 1,600 horsepower at altitude. The Japanese engineers were astonished by its balance between power and reliability. Their own engines, like the Nakajima Ha-45, struggled to maintain performance above 25,000 feet and often overheated after prolonged use. The Mustang's engine, by contrast, was a mechanical symphony, durable, efficient, and elegantly simple. The more they studied, the deeper their unease grew. The Americans had not only created a powerful machine, they had created one that could be mass-produced with perfect consistency. The modular design meant components to be swapped in minutes. Standardized bolts, identical parts, and interchangeable systems spoke of an industrial order beyond comprehension. One engineer reportedly murmured, "This plane was not built, it was produced." As they peeled back the aircraft's skin, they encountered another marvel, the laminar flow wing. It was thin, smooth, and mathematically perfect, reducing drag and increasing fuel efficiency. To achieve this level of aerodynamic refinement, Japan's designers would have needed access to wind tunnels, precision instruments, and metallurgical tools they simply no longer possessed.
Many of those facilities had already been destroyed by American bombers.
The Mustang's range stunned them. It could escort bombers from Iwo Jima to Tokyo, nearly 1,500 kilometers, and still engage in combat. Japanese interceptors like the Ki-44 Shoki had less than half that range. The Mustang could attack, chase, and return home, while Japanese fighters were forced to land or crash for lack of fuel. In the words of one observer, "It does not fight for territory, it owns the sky." Then came the cockpit. The engineers examined its layout and realized they were looking at a revolution in pilot efficiency. Every dial and switch was logically placed. The gun sight was gyroscopically stabilized, allowing for deadly accuracy even at high speeds. The radios were crystal clear, capable of long-range communication, and the oxygen system was advanced enough to sustain pilots at altitudes where Japanese flyers would black out. Even the seat harnesses and emergency releases were superior. It was a machine built not just for war, but for the survival of the man who flew it. And then, the final discovery, the materials. Metallurgists tested samples from the Mustang's frame and found lightweight alloys with remarkable tensile strength. Aluminum of a purity Japan could no longer refine. Copper wiring insulated by advanced polymers, and steel hardened in ways their factories couldn't reproduce. Their own aircraft, starved of resources, were being built with substitutes, steel mixed with inferior alloys, wood, and even bamboo. Every test reinforced a painful truth: Japan had fallen hopelessly behind in the technological race. As they finished the analysis, the engineers stood in silence. The air was heavy with realization. They had seen the future, and it belonged to their enemies. One of them later wrote in a private notebook, "We looked upon this aircraft and saw not defeat, but destiny. This is not a creation of men, but of a civilization built by machines." For weeks afterward, teams tried to copy certain designs: sketches of the engine cooling system, studies of the airframe contours, prototypes inspired by the Mustang's aerodynamics. But there was no time. Japan's industrial base lay in ruins, its fuel reserves gone, its skies ruled by the enemy. The Mustang had not just outperformed their aircraft, it had exposed the entire illusion of Japanese self-sufficiency. By summer 1945, the situation was hopeless. American bombers leveled city after city. Entire production chains collapsed. Even the best pilots, men who had survived since Pearl Harbor, were dying faster than they could be replaced. And still, every day, the P-51 Mustangs appeared above Japan, untouchable and relentless, escorting the steel giants that reduced the empire to rubble. When Japan finally surrendered on August 15, 1945, the wreck of that captured Mustang still rested quietly in a hangar outside Tokyo. Its tires were flat, its wings half disassembled, its paint scorched by time. Yet it remained, untouched, a silent witness to a moment of truth that had come too late. Years later, when Allied occupation forces discovered the remains, they were astonished to find the detailed reports of the Japanese engineers, neatly typed, bound, and preserved. The analysis was meticulous, almost reverent. It read like the autopsy of a god. Today, the P-51 Mustang stands in museums across the world, a symbol of freedom, precision, and air superiority. But to those few Japanese engineers who once stood around its battered frame, it was not merely a machine, it was a prophecy, a vision of the future where technology and industry, not bravery or honor, would decide the fate of nations. And as they left that hangar in 1945, weary and silent, they knew that Japan's defeat had not come from the sky. It had come from the factory floor.